This is a tough one. I think probably so. The craziest pivot I've ever seen from a founder was on the very first Techstars program that I ran. We invested in a company called Intelligent X, and they were using AI to brew beer, to make beer more personalized. So you would buy a beer, you would have a drink, and there was a QR code on the can, and you would scan it and you would give feedback. So you would say, oh, it's a little bit too hoppy, or it's too light, or I want a little bit more of this. And then all of that aggregate feedback would go back in and improve the recipe over time. And so it was a really smart team. They ended up being one of Wired's top innovations of 2015 or 2016. But as they kind of got to fundraising and going into that side of the world, it was a challenging kind of landscape for them at the time, and for a lot of investors, investing in anything that's related to alcohol is very challenging. And so they decided to wind down that business. But Cody, who was one of the founders of that company, about maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I met him for a coffee, and I'll always remember a little coffee shop near the Port Authority bus terminal in New York City. And he told me this idea about luggage storage and moving luggage around and moving your items around in the real world, almost like an AWS for your stuff. And as he told me the storage idea, I kind of thought, this feels like there's a lot of these ideas out there. But then as he talked about the idea that you could go to the gym and then you could leave your bag at the gym, it would automatically go to a dry cleaners and then be delivered back to your house. Or, all of these kind of, you go to the airport, you can leave your bag at the airport, it'll automatically be delivered to your hotel, and you can just go and get started with your trip. And I thought the idea was brilliant. And Cody launched the idea. They recently raised their Series A from Andreessen Horowitz. They raised from General Catalyst in their first round. They're now in 100 and something countries around the world, and scaling unbelievably quickly. So from beer to luggage storage, I think is probably one of the craziest pivots I've seen.
That's a story, by the way. Great story. I mean, even before becoming an investor, probably an entrepreneur, you worked in different kinds of sectors and industries.
Yeah,
Did experience prepare you for the startup?
So I was a journalist first. Well, I was a failed musician. I always wanted to be a rock star, but I wasn't good enough to do that. And so I studied journalism when I was in college, and wrote for a couple of magazines and newspapers. I presented some radio shows and worked in actually in the very early days of kind of online publishing as well. My first startup experience was with a company in San Francisco who got VC funding back when I'd never even heard of a venture capitalist in 1998. And I was one of their kind of European editors for a travel site they were building. But journalism, I think, was a great primer for entrepreneurship and for VC, because actually the job is entirely based on research and asking questions. And so you have to spend an awful lot of time learning how to ask people the right questions, phrase those questions in the right way. You have to learn how to really listen to what people are saying. I think one of the mistakes that we all make is we kind of either have happy ears, and so we hear the bits that we want to hear, or we're distracted by our watch or our phone or a bird flying by. And so we only hear maybe 50 or 60% of what someone is saying. But if you're presenting a 3-hour radio show every evening, and there's, a couple of 100,000 people listening to it, they will ring in and they will send letters in and tell you that you're terrible if you didn't pick up on one word in a sentence. So you have to learn how to really concentrate and not just hear what someone is saying, but kind of get the full answer, maybe from their body language, etc. And so I think that for me, now when it comes to writing investment memos, now when it comes to kind of clarity of thinking around businesses, when it comes to kind of asking questions in interviews, etc., I think that gave me a really good grounding, not just in kind of content and in questioning, but also in human psychology. And I think that was really valuable, and that was the grounding. And it was from that content base that I started my first company, and that led to the journey into VC.
I mean, you have been involved hundreds of thousands of startups, I think, for many years.
Feels like it.
Yes. What have been the biggest learnings and also takeaways from them?
Yeah, I think the cliche is kind of fortune favors the prepared mind, but it's a cliche because it's true. So the best companies that I have worked with are the ones where the founder is super passionate about the sector that they're in or the problem that they're solving. They have gone really deep into the market and the opportunity. They have conducted hours, maybe weeks, maybe even months of customer discovery conversations, and they know chapter and verse on their competition. And the way that that manifests is, you see it in conversations and in the kind of dialogue that you have with founders. But the types of companies that prepare really detailed Notion pages and use those as data rooms. And I think we saw that with the folks from Twice Commerce, which is a shared investment that you and I have. Tuomo and the team there had maybe one of the most insanely detailed data rooms I've ever seen. And it meant the process was much quicker for us as investors, because if there was a question I had, I didn't need to schedule a meeting and take 30 minutes out of their calendar and mine and my partners. I could go through that data room and get the answer that I needed straight away, and then have time to mull it over and ask a better question. So I think that kind of preparedness is really important. I think being open-minded and having some humility is really important. I mean, for many years, I ran the Techstars Accelerator in New York and London, and a huge component of that is meeting lots of mentors and former founders and investors and people from various different parts of the business world. And loads of them will tell you your idea is terrible, and a bunch of them will tell you your idea is good, and some of them will give you good feedback and good suggestions, etc. But I think the best founders are the ones that constantly want to hear, whether it's from their customers, from their peers, from investors, from others, like, what does good look like? What does great look like? How do I get better? The best founders I've worked with have been learning machines. They're constantly asking for podcast recommendations or book recommendations. And I think that kind of intellectual curiosity is something that's just so important, because you have to wear a lot of different masks as a founder and as an investor. But I think particularly for founders, it's important that they have that kind of intellectual curiosity. So that kind of almost founder market fit and focus and detail orientation, and then that kind of intellectual curiosity are two big ones that are always big green flags for me.
Well, what is the evaluation of a startup process look like in Tera VC? I mean, how do you process all the deal flow?
Yeah, so we get a bunch of cold inbound, which we share. We'll kind of flag it. So the different partners within the fund have maybe some different areas of expertise or some different areas of focus. So if we get something that's maybe fintech or cybersecurity related, we'll normally send it on to Stanislav. If we get something that's maybe more food or retail or marketplace related, then it'll come to me. So we get inbound like that. We get lots and lots of introductions from our portfolio founders. Because Tera leads rounds, we get a lot of introductions and inbound from angels and other VC funds. So normally we'll do kind of a 30-minute kind of intro call with the companies, and then we have 2 deal flow calls internally every week. So every call we have, we take some notes, we share some details. We have a little 1-pager that we prepare, and we share that with the rest of the team. And in one of our weekly calls, we talk about the opportunity, and normally we kind of score it. So we say, okay, I'm definitely not interested, like I'm a maybe, I think this is kind of interesting, or like, yes, we should definitely talk to the company. And if we get enough people saying they're interested, well, then either we'll organize a team call, or we will think about some questions that we have and go back directly to the company. Or so normally we have 1 or 2 kind of introductory calls, short one, then a longer one, and then we start to get into diligence, where again there's a full team call. We might start getting some of our venture partners or some of our existing portfolio founders to interview or to ask questions or to test the product or to give us some feedback. If the company that we're talking to is happy about it and we're excited, we'll maybe start making some introductions to other potential co-investors. So the process lasts, anything from probably 4 weeks in a good case, 3 or 4 weeks, right the way up to 6 or 8 weeks if we're really digging in, or if there's some very technical due diligence that we need to do. And then the final stage is we have an investment committee meeting. We individually, so each partner will take the lead on a deal. So the lead partner then pitches the company to everyone else. So that's why data rooms are very important, so that I do a good job of pitching someone else's company. And then we have a full consensus model. So we all have to say yes to the deal for it to happen. If one of us says no, then we don't invest. And we do our best to get decisions to people quickly. We do our best to give feedback where we can. And in a lot of cases, maybe companies are a little bit too early in the game, or in some cases maybe even slightly too far along. But we do try to make connections, or give them some valuable feedback that'll give them a better chance maybe next time they talk to us or someone else.
So in these meetings, what are the red flags? I mean, for yourself and for the team. I mean, face-to-face calls or online calls, do you have some patterns that you say, oh, this will be a failure, or the team that we don't like, very quickly?
Yeah, I think companies. So there's a few, right? I think there are a lot of companies where. Well, let me flip that. The best companies that we've invested in, it's like they're already driving a car, and the car is going downhill, and they want us to get in with a full tank of gas and fill it up so that they can go even faster and further. The big red flag for me is when you meet a founder who's kind of standing next to the car with the keys in their hand, going, "Do you want to drive?" And so you meet founders who they kind of are waiting for investment to happen for the business to happen. And I think there has to be some momentum. So a lack of momentum, whether that be, even if you're at an idea stage, I would expect that if I'm having a call with you every couple of days in the early stages, that like you would have some new piece of customer development or some survey that you ran, or a couple of hundred signups to a newsletter that you set up to attract customers. Or if you're if you've got a product in the market, that you're having meaningful maybe sales conversations if you're a B2B company. So if you don't have that, then that's a big red flag. If you're at an idea stage and you haven't done any customer development, even if you've got great founder market fit, I think that's a really, really red flag. I think if you don't have a clear idea of how much money you want to raise, and you don't, it doesn't have to be precise to the last cent, but I think being able to say to someone, we're raising 500K, that's going to allow me to hire these 2 or 3 people in these roles. I've already got a pipeline of that talent, and it's going to allow me to get to 15K MRR, and then we're going to raise $1.5 million in a year's time. Like, that's that prepared mind. And I meet a lot of founders who go, oh, we might raise something between 1 and 2 million. It's a big difference, right? Cozy, what's $1 million between friends? It's a lot of money. So I think when people don't know what they're going to spend, when people maybe don't have that kind of ideal customer profile in mind, and then there's little things when you're on calls with people, just watching body language, seeing how people react. If I ask a technical question and the CEO answers it, sometimes I wonder why, or if I'm on a call, and this is one for all founders, if there's 3 or 4 founders in a team and you're on a call, even if it's just 30 minutes with a VC, if only one person from your team speaks in that time, it kind of looks like everyone else is like a mannequin on the call. And it's a bit weird that you've got like kind of 3 people observing you and one person talking. So I think the team dynamic is really important to try and observe. And we try, and I have thankfully been successful so far in all of the deals that I've led with Tera. I have met in person the founding team and spent kind of in most cases a couple of hours with them, and gone for lunch or gone for dinner, or been able to kind of have a coffee or a drink with them, because I want to see that dynamic. I want to see how these people interact with each other, because co-founder breakups, particularly at pre-seed and seed, are a very real challenge and a real issue that I've seen a lot, unfortunately.
What excites you most right now about the emerging tech trends and startups?
I think it was funny. I had a conversation with someone yesterday where we were talking about some of the hype that's happening around kind of the AI at the moment. And he said something that kind of resonated with me, that this period of time reminds me an awful lot of like 2008, when the App Store came out first, and there was this kind of explosion of ideas and products and builders and kind of crazy stuff going on, and it was really exciting. Like, it was really exciting to see all of these. And listen, 95% of the ideas were terrible, right? And never worked. But the 5% that did were Uber or TransferWise or Stripe or King Games or Supercell, or any of these businesses that became absolutely huge on mobile. And I think there is a similar explosion of AI happening at the moment. I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of okay businesses. I think there are some industries that are well positioned to be disrupted with what we currently have in terms of large language models. So that excites me. And the pace at which people can build a business excites me, and even build a product. I think it's 20 years since I started my first company. And you kind of think back 20 years and go, if I wanted to build something, like a video conferencing tool, it might have taken me $5 million and 2 years of engineering time to do it. And I would have needed my own server racks and a cooling system. Now I can go on to GitHub Copilot and basically request that be built for me in 10 seconds. So I think the pace at which people can innovate, the pace at which people can create things is exciting. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities in the broader climate and energy and sustainability space. I think, like anyone who's thinking about the future, in my case, I have a 2.5-year-old, so I think about his future an awful lot. I think there's a lot of work that we need to do on the planet to make it a better place, and from a purely capitalist perspective, there's a lot of opportunity to build great businesses whilst making that difference and that impact. And I have always been very excited by food. I think what we eat, how we eat it, where we grow it, the quality of it, etc. Again, we're probably 5 years behind the US from a European perspective, but we're starting to see some quite exciting stuff in that space as well, and some funds that are specifically dedicated to that sector in the UK and wider European markets. So I want to see more in that world as well.
You have seen lots of countries, and now you are focusing on Nordics, Baltics, especially in the. What is their secret about creating lots of startups and successful startups?
So success breeds success. I think if you look at the Bay Area and Silicon Valley more specifically, you'll see that the people who started Apple and made money from Apple, later became investors in the next wave of kind of 80s, 90s .com era businesses. In many cases, the people who came out of that kind of .com era, the PayPal mafia, became investors in Facebook. The Facebook mafia became investors in the next generation of companies coming through. And so you have this kind of virtuous cycle where people have built technology businesses, so they have some expertise. They've made money from technology businesses, so that they know that that's a possibility, and they're therefore comfortable reinvesting in that world. And so they bring not just money, but expertise and knowledge and a network. And if I look at going back 20 years again, when I started my first business in Ireland, there weren't a ton of technology businesses that have made money. Most of the people who made money made it through real estate or large agricultural businesses or kind of infrastructure businesses. And when you were going and saying, hey, we're going to build an app business, or we're going to build a Facebook games business, people would look at you as though you had 10 heads. And so there wasn't that same ecosystem. Whereas you fast forward 20 years, you have Stripe, you have Intercom, you have Wayflyer, you have Mana Aero. There are so many successful Irish companies over the last 20 years that now that next generation of angel investors is there. Now that generation of people who've built businesses to millions of users is there, and they're not scared of reinvesting. And Estonia has that. Skype, the first employee of Skype became the founder of TransferWise, and now Tavid is one of the most active angel and VC investors in that ecosystem again. And there's someone who's built multiple businesses to tens, if not hundreds of millions of users, and who has this kind of incredible network as a result. And that's the flywheel that we see. And we see delegations coming from Korea, from Japan, from all over the world to Estonia to see how that kind of ecosystem has been built. And we spent a lot of time looking at it when I was at Techstars as well. But it is that success breeds success, and they also have a very tax efficient tax system, or very efficient tax system in Estonia, which certainly helps in terms of reinvestment into businesses. But honestly, the biggest thing is people who understand technology are more likely to invest in it, and because of their experience and knowledge, they can then not just be a check on your cap table or a line on your cap table. They can actually sit down with you and go through some of the technical challenges that you'll face when you're scaling, etc. And that's really critical.
Your background has been also, you have the experience in the acceleration program in Techstars, and now in another hat, you are investor, which is completely different. What are the differences? Do you miss the old days?
Yeah, I definitely miss it. There's I think anyone who's ever, and I say I do talks at universities and schools and various different places all the time, and the thing I say to people is what I genuinely feel to be true. Starting my first company was like the dumbest, craziest, best thing that I've ever done, right? It drove me crazy. I could probably draw you a picture of the roof of my bedroom from the period that we were first running the business, because you were awake at 3 a.m. so much, looking up at the ceiling and wondering if you were going to make payroll. So I think being a founder is quite addictive, actually, and you never stop kind of seeing opportunities or hearing kind of someone have a conversation going, oh yeah, actually that should exist. And I think running the accelerator was fun in that regard, because you were kind of at the coalface with the founders, right? You spent 3 or 4 months, or 6 months in some cases, in a small room with them, and you could see who was happy and who was sad, and whose phone call was going well, and who needed you to, who did you need to take into a room and have a quiet word with, and build their confidence up. So you kind of felt very much in the trenches, but it was I could still go home and sleep at night. It was a little bit less stressful, but I certainly miss that kind of very hands-on buzz. I think we are quite hands-on, high conviction investors now at Tera, but it's from a VC angle, it's a different type of relationship that you almost by necessity have to have with them, because we manage money on behalf of pension funds. We manage money on behalf of individuals. And so in some respects, as a VC, you're friendly with the companies and you're on their side and you're hopefully in the trenches helping them out. But you also have to be a financial guardian of those businesses. And so that's a little bit of a kind of different relationship to have. The good thing from my perspective is I get to keep kind of mentoring on various different kind of accelerator programs around the world. I try to spend as much time as I can going and talking at universities in different places, so that I can kind of get those hear people talk or watch the sparks fly in someone's head when they start thinking about an idea for the first time, because that's definitely the part of the process where you kind of feel like you can, that 0 to 1 phase, you can make the biggest difference as an individual.
You are on board of lots of startups. What does the board meetings looks like for the different stages of startups?
It's a really good question, right? And I think it's something that we all do a bad job of teaching founders about, because I have some board meetings that are very well structured and very sensible, and very valuable and very short. And then I have a lot of other board meetings that are none of those things, but just very long. So the best board meetings are ones where the founders send you all of the data and financial information 2 or 3 days in advance. So they send you the board meeting deck, and you have the ability to read through that, and you should read through it. So that then the first kind of 20 or 30 minutes of a board meeting are just the founder going, look, does anyone have any questions about any of the numbers? Are there any areas of concern, etc.? So you should be able to get through that part mostly via email, actually, and then a little bit of dialogue at the start of the meeting. But really, then you want the majority of the meeting to be, maybe 1, 2, or 3 big strategic questions that the company has. Should we pivot to a B2B model? Should we start our Series A fundraise? What do people think about hiring, our CTO out of Facebook and paying them $300K a year? And you really want to get the collective brain power of your board on those big topics, because what will end up happening if you're just presenting 50 slides of financial results, people will zero in on very tactical things that are not important, right? The board meeting is about strategy, and it's about the future of the business. And yes, you should discuss, where you are at that moment in time, but it can't be 3 or 4 hours of kind of picking at scabs. So the best companies organize their board meetings like that, and then they have a forum for the founder to talk about the other executives in the business. So we have a kind of executive session in the best board meetings where the COO or CMO or other people who are presenting leave the room, and the founder says, I'm really struggling with this person, or I don't know what to do in this situation. So I think the best ones are maybe 2 hours long and well structured. The mistake that a lot of companies make is they assume that their board is there for them to report into. And that changes, yes, as you get bigger, it is a little bit more about reporting. But in the early days, your board should be a group of very, very smart people whose brains you can activate on big challenges that are facing you.
what habits or personal rituals are most important for you and your productivity? How is the daily productivity that routine look like?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I've a 2.5-year-old son, so I take him to nursery every morning, and I collect him from nursery every evening. So my day is kind of bookended. 8 a.m. we walk out the door and walk for kind of 15 minutes together, and 5 p.m. I pick him up and we come back. So that's a kind of ritual or habit that we've gotten into, and that I don't ever want to not do, because I think it's just a kind of, first of all, I'd leave that door as a dad, and I come back in that door at work, right? And so even just that act of leaving my house and coming back in the front door is like my short commute. I try to run and exercise a lot. Now that I'm older, I need to do a lot more of it. But I started running during the lockdown here in London, and I found it was really useful because it was, I'm not very fit, or certainly I wasn't back then. And so I couldn't check my phone and I couldn't take a call because I was mostly struggling to keep breathing and stay alive. And so going out and spending time just listening to music, and having time to kind of allow thoughts to process, I think is really important, because if I sit in front of a laptop, I'll end up replying to emails, and just kind of your day fills up and you sometimes wonder if you actually achieved anything. I try to set aside a lot of time. Like I subscribe to a ton of Substacks and The Economist and the FT and New Scientist and a bunch of magazines, and I really, again, try to make sure that I have time to kind of sit down and read those, and spend less time on TikTok and Threads and various other platforms, because I think the act of reading an article that takes you 15 minutes to read versus a tweet is just, again, good focus. And maybe it's just because I'm an old journalist, but I think there's some merit in that. So I think those are kind of big ones. I track my sleep with this Oura ring. I'm like, borderline obsessed with it now. But I think those are all little things that I try to incorporate to kind of be more functional, and also to try and, I think there's a big difference in the way that people work, right? Like the older I get, I think the smarter I'm able to work. And so of course, there are days where you do 12, 15, 20 hours and it's crazy, right? But there are also a lot of other days where you can get as much work as you need to get done in 4 hours, and actually do some reading, or listening to a podcast and processing information that will make you a better investor, or give you better questions to ask in the next meeting. And I think that if you don't take time to do that, it's very easy, with the pace at which technology is moving, to kind of be left behind, right? And so that's something I'm very intentional about. I wrote a book about 2 years ago. We're writing the second edition of it now. Like, all of these little things of just being very kind of systematic in terms of spending time in places is good. And then the last one is I make Legos. So my mum bought me a Lego Eiffel Tower for one of the Christmases, maybe one of the lockdown Christmases, and it was the first piece of Lego I got probably since I was 12 years old, and I loved it. And so I have started. And so that's my little Zen meditation at night, is building little Lego. There's a guy in Ireland called Dublin Bricks who makes Lego replicas of football stadiums and pubs in Dublin, and so I have tons and tons of those. That's my meditation, listening to music and doing that.
I mean, yeah, great to know. We are also fan of Legos with my son. We are also weekly doing lots of Legos.
Yeah.
And if you could
amazing.
recommend, yes, it is amazing. He loves it, and we sat on a table and worked together.
Yep.
We have done dark weather lately. It's not completed yet, where we are working on it.
Getting there.
Yes. Any recommendations? 3 books for the startups founders.
So I think the best, or at least one of the best books I've read for founders, is a book called Obviously Awesome, by a lady called April Dunford. And it's all about the positioning of your business. And so it's not quite marketing and it's not quite branding, but it is almost more important than both of those things, and informs both of those things. And it's a book that I have been recommending to people for years, and I've been lucky enough to see April speak at a couple of events, and she actually has a new book out now on sales and how to do early stage sales, which is also brilliant. But Obviously Awesome, I think, is probably the top one. I think the Ben Horowitz wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which I think is quite a good book, and I'm sure lots of people have recommended it, but it's good because it talks about the bad side of being a founder. I think a lot of books are kind of like, oh, everything is amazing and like it's great doing all of this and build, etc. Like he talks about a lot of the bad times, and I think as someone who started a business that failed, massively, I think that's something that gave me a lot of empathy with founders, and I was very open when I was running Techstars, still am, about kind of what happens when your business fails. And so I think the hard thing about hard things does an amazing job of going through that. And then for very early stage, like people who are just starting out, there's a book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which is about customer development. And I think that book, if you have an idea and you want to, test it and or throw a bunch of ideas against the wall and see what sticks, like that book in terms of a systematic guide for how to do customer development, it's there are tools that make it a lot easier now, but the actual processes that he describes in there are absolutely amazing. So yeah, those are three of the best.
What advice would you give your 25-year-old self about investing, working, and life?
I think don't overthink things. I think as I said, I probably spent a lot of time looking at the ceiling at 3 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of time worrying about things that I didn't need to. Like, yes, I needed to worry about, but actually, I spent more time dreading sending an email than I did sending it, getting the reply, and then realizing the reply wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, with customers, etc. So I think don't overthink things, and don't be afraid to talk to other people. I was in the early business days, I thought our idea was so amazing that if I told anyone else, they would instantly run off and steal it, which is so dumb, right? Like there were a bunch of other people doing the same thing. And so I think the point at which I got better at being a founder and the businesses became more successful was the point at which I would say to people all the time, oh, this is I don't know how to fire someone, or I don't know what to do here. We're in a negotiation with a company in Dubai. Like, I've never done that before. What do you do? And once you lose that shame and are unafraid to admit that you actually don't know the answer to something, the number of people that will come out and go, oh, of course, I'll help. Yes, I'll give you this answer. Yeah, let's do a 30-minute call, or let's get a coffee or a lunch. Like the number of people that contributed, many of whom probably to this day don't know how much they contributed to me as a founder, an entrepreneur, an investor, with just those meetings is incalculable. But it all came from me going, I like I still say to founders, 3 most powerful words in the English language are, I don't know. Because then you go, can you help? I don't know the answer to that. Can I come back to you tomorrow? I don't know how to do that. Can you show me? It gives you a kind of opportunity to ask a bigger and better question.
Eamonn, thank you very much for this great talk with you. It was always a pleasure to meet with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. No, it's been great.